That car. That is such an amazing thing to be sitting inside of. I'm David Kirkpatrick. I don't know if anybody said that, but I'm a writer about technology, and I have a company called Techonomy. And you know what Techonomy is all about is the transformative power of technology to drive the world forward. And you know what Michael was just talking about is a lot about that. And then sitting in that car, it's just such an astonishing statement about confidence in what technology can do that you've sort of realized in a way that I don't think anybody would have expected possible, and not only in one company, but in two major companies, SpaceX and Tesla. I guess I'd just like to start, Elon, by asking you to talk about what makes you tick, and what is it that drives you to be able to drive that?
Well, I mean, I like technology. I like doing things that that have the potential to change the world in a positive way. And the reasoning behind Tesla specifically was that that there needed to be an acceleration of electric vehicles, and it became clear to me that, and I think to a lot of people, that if it was simply left up to the big car companies, we wouldn't see compelling electric cars, not for a long time. And I think that became very clear in the movie Who Killed the Electric Car, where you know, GM recalled the EV1 and then crushed them so that nobody could get them back when California changed its regulations. I mean, that really hammered home the message that unless some new company came along and created an electric car, that it would be a long time before we would see sustainable transport.
Was seeing that movie literally part of your thought process that helped motivate you?
It was, absolutely.
Huh.
I mean, I've been a proponent of electric cars for a long time. I mean, from when I was in college when I was studying physics, I mean, it seemed just very obvious that electric cars are the future. And I think, in fact, all transport, with the ironic exception of rockets, will go electric. It's just a question of how fast it goes electric. And we have a fundamental issue right now where there's an unpriced externality, a tragedy of the commons, that's on a scale that I don't think the world has ever seen before.
You mean carbon?
Yeah, exactly.
You think that realization is going to sink in so that we then recognize how urgently we've got to make the transition?
Yes, I do. I think that will eventually sink in. But the problem with that, with the carbon capacity of the oceans and atmosphere, is that it's on such an epic scale with so much inertia that the point at which it becomes obvious that it's a severe problem, it's like imagine there's a supertanker coming towards you, and you know, it suddenly appears out of the fog. And you're like, oh wait, supertanker coming towards me. You can't turn the supertanker real fast.
Please wind, blow, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to keep going in that direction. So that it's got a lot of inertia, and then the amount of time that it'll take to switch the global industrial base to sustainable generation and consumption of energy is going to be measured in decades. So. It's just one of those things where you need to, because the transition will take so long, you have to start early. And in order to have electric cars actually sell, we had to work super hard to make the car as compelling as possible. So you know, that's the reason, I think, why the car ended up being, you know, a great car, is because we had a really dedicated team that believes in the mission.
Well, I mean, when the Model S came out, I mean, people said, oh, it's a good car, but I don't think anybody, even including you were telling me this in the car, expected the scale of success. You said your optimistic estimates were still a third less than where you're currently selling.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how Panasonic was able to build enough batteries for what you projected, but not for the, you know, how many vehicles are you building at this point?
So we're at around 600 a week. And our projections were about 400 a week. So Panasonic, which is our main supplier for the battery cells, was able to ramp up by 50%, but it's going to take them a little longer to improve production beyond that. I mean, I expect that our cell supply constraints will be solved, probably around the middle of next year or maybe the second quarter. But it has been good. It's been well received.
It's so well. I mean, honestly, I don't know a rich person who doesn't either have one or want one, and that is kind of amazing.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it is to your enormous credit that you have built such an astonishing car. I mean, I think anybody photographing it or looking at it as it comes down that aisle has got to admit it's one of the most beautiful cars that's ever existed, on top of being possibly the most efficient car that's ever existed. So enormous kudos to you. There's so much to talk about, and I want to try to pull it all together. You're also doing a huge other business, SpaceX. Talk about how you think about the two of them together, and where's that business going?
Sure. Well, let's see. I don't know if we've got the SpaceX video. That might be helpful to just, if we can cue the SpaceX video, if we can. Otherwise, we'll just keep talking.
I didn't know we were going to show it, but if
there
we
is
can,
one,
I'd love to
believe,
see it.
But if not, we'll just keep talking.
Is this guy something or what? I mean, I love that you had the one in there where you launched the rocket and then it didn't show the full video, but it sort of moved around and then landed right back where it started.
Yeah.
I mean, you're succeeding where governments have failed. That's what's so astonishing about what you. It seems like it is something rooted in a confidence in technology's potential that drives you. And talk a little bit about that. You are an engineer. You're somebody who understands how this stuff works. Is that sort of the central thing that allows you to realize where you can go that so many other leaders have missed?
Well, I mean, I'm not entirely certain I have a good I think there's some amount of good fortune involved here. I think I'm trying to think of what's an accurate explanation here. I guess I mean, there's certain things that I really believe need to happen, and I was able to convince a lot of great people to join me in trying to solve those problems. And a lot of the times, I think people ascribe to me things that where the credit is really due to a much bigger team. In fact, that's I think the real answer is, if you can get a group of really talented people together and unite them around a challenge and have them work together to the best of their abilities, then a company will achieve great things.
Yeah, but that's clearly true. But, I'm sure you do encounter this all the time, because so many people look at you and they say, how is this guy doing all this so effectively? And then so many people turn to themselves and say, and well, how come I can't? I mean, or maybe not enough people do. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe being an engineer allows you to sort of see what's possible. Not to mention, you had a lot of money. You did, obviously with PayPal, you made some serious money that got you started, and that did help, obviously. But it's not just that, clearly, because there's a lot of guys and women with a lot of money who haven't had the will and the vision to push forward the way you have. I mean, back to Tesla for a minute, I think there are a lot of people who think it's possible you could be leading the entire car industry, not just in vision and technology, but in sales at some point down the road if you keep heading the direction you're going. And I talked to some of the big automakers, and they are in awe of what you've done, and they're copying you probably in ways that you're happy to see them do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's something I think all of us in the press are constantly wrestling with. What makes you tick differently? I mean, do you look at other people and say, how come more people don't just try harder?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, actually, it's more like, I think people self-limit more than they realize. Like I keep getting asked this question of like, well, how about innovation? And how do you do more innovation? And I think the number one thing is people should just try. I mean, like literally just,
And keep trying.
Like, did you try yesterday?
Right.
Did you try today? But it is quite, I mean, it takes a lot of mental exertion to innovate. And I think it is helpful to learn about different industries and try to cross-pollinate, because very often people get siloed in a particular industry. And so me running both Tesla and SpaceX has been helpful because I see how both industries work, and I can take things from one to another. Yeah, so I'll give you a couple examples. I mean, one is say the Model S is an all aluminum body and chassis, and we employ some advanced joining techniques and advanced casting techniques and so forth. So that's like a fairly obvious thing if you're coming from the aerospace industry, and like you don't see a lot of airplanes made out of steel. But cars are almost all made out of steel. So in order to make the Model S light enough, so to make the non-battery pack portion of the mass light.
So you could get more range.
Yeah, you get more range, exactly.
Because range is one of the big things you solve before anybody else.
Right, exactly. I mean, the two big factors for range are what is your aerodynamic drag and how much does the car weigh. Those are overwhelmingly the big factors for range. And so making the car weigh less was really important, and actually not just for range, but also for handling and acceleration. So that was like an obvious thing to make a car out of aluminum. But the Model S is actually the only car made out of aluminum in North America.
It is?
Yeah. In fact, there are very few cars made out of aluminum worldwide, but the only other sort of passenger vehicles are made in Europe if they're made out of aluminum. So but that was like an obvious thing to do. And then on the other side, the car business is very good at manufacturing. It's actually incredible that a car, which is this super complicated object with dozens of subsystems, can actually be bought for the amount of money that it's, like you can get a pretty good car for like $20,000. And so taking the manufacturing techniques that were developed in the automotive industry and applying them to rocketry.
Going the other way.
Yeah, has been really helpful. In fact, our head of production at SpaceX came from the car industry. He used to run production of the Mini for BMW.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this thing about waking up and saying, why not innovate, is a great sort of way to think, and I'm sure we all want to be inspired to do that. But the thing that's so amazing about Tesla in particular is literally 5 years ago today, pretty much, the company was perceived to be on its deathbed, right? I mean, you were struggling, and there was a lot of
some reality to that perception, I think.
There was some reality. Yeah. So it was really tight.
It was really tight.
It was very, very bad financially
Yes.
there for a moment. And
yes.
Were you still focusing on innovating at that moment?
I think innovating to avoid death. But I mean, yeah, I mean,
how did you get out of that? That's the key. What is it that, when you look back at that experience from your point of view, is there anything you think you did right that is what helped that sort of get behind you?
Well, I think well, I'll tell you sort of like where things were in 2008, which was the most difficult time for Tesla, as it was for many companies. So in summer of 2008, we were trying to raise a financing round to take Tesla to the next level, and then the financial markets fell apart, and we weren't able to raise any money at all. Just when we needed money, we weren't able to raise any money. And then you had General Motors and Chrysler that were going bankrupt. So trying to raise money for a startup electric car company in the face of General Motors going bankrupt was a very challenging endeavor. And in fact, we weren't able to raise any outside money. So the only choice I had was to invest all the money that I had left.
Your own money, yeah.
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 Yeah. And in fact, I had to borrow money from friends for living expenses.
Wow.
And so it would have been, if things didn't work out, it would have been negative, essentially. But because I was willing to invest everything that I had, then the other investors in the company were willing to put up the other half of the money that was needed to keep Tesla alive. And then there's a whole bunch of dramas. Skipping a bunch of drama. We were actually able to close the financing round only on the last hour of the last day where it was possible. And it was 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, 2008. And that was literally it was then or if we would have gone bankrupt a few days after Christmas.
But again, even at that moment, I would assume that it was your willingness to make that kind of personal bet was driven by your faith in the technology and the promise of what you were doing and the confidence in the power of innovation. I mean, is that overstating it?
I think that probably is overstating it. Yeah.
Well, what was it then?
I thought we would probably die.
You thought you'd probably die. You were.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you thought, I'm going to give it a shot, but it probably won't work.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's.
And here it is. So now the company's worth $17 billion. You know, 5 years later, he's got a $17 billion company, but that's the kind of guy he is. I mean, really, wow.
I think it would have been irrational to have any other view.
You seem like a kind of you believe in rationality, okay. But not,
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, you know.
I should mention, like, some credit is also due to Daimler, because
they were an investor and partner.
Well, they became an investor in early 2009. So the Daimler money was crucial to the success of Tesla. Although people often think that it was the U.S. government investment that was the lifesaver for Tesla. It was not. But the government loan that we got, we only received that first monies were received in like March of 2010, when we were actually in okay shape. So the government loan was an accelerant, but it was not life or death.
You were already rebounding then.
Yeah. But the Daimler investment was life or death.
Are they still a good partner?
Yeah, they're great. We're coming out with the Mercedes B-Class, which is an all-electric car. It'll be the biggest electric car program in Daimler history. In fact, bigger than the sum of all electric vehicle programs they've done to date. And that goes into production, I believe, in March or April.
Now, there's so many things to talk to you about, but one of the other things that's so interesting about Tesla is, there's so much to talk about SpaceX too, but we don't have tons of time, but you're building this, recharging infrastructure. I mean, you're basically building filling stations for the electric future.
Yeah.
Right? Talk quickly about that and how you're doing that quickly. You've already got a lot of them, and you have a plan to build a lot more soon, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we're now opening up a supercharger, I think, every 2 or 3 days.
Really?
Yeah.
How many do you have now, roughly?
Well, I actually don't have the right up to the minute count, but I think we must be approaching 50 or 60.
Wow. All over the country, yeah.
And internationally.
Really? How many other countries are they in?
Well, we've got 80% of the population of Norway covered. This is kind of, Norway is actually our highest per capita sales in the world by far.
Norway?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know, Norway's...
The Norwegians in the audience like that.
Because Norway's so awesome. That's the reason.
Well, good for you.
There's a lot of reasons, but I do find it funny that sometimes people wonder if our car works in the snow, and it's like, yeah, our #1 sales per capita is in Norway.
It's a snowy place, yes.
In fact, our #1 customer lives above the Arctic Circle.
What, somebody who's bought 10 Teslas? What is it?
I think he's now on 12 or something.
Really? You want more of those.
Yeah.
Of course, he probably can't get as many as he wants, given that you have such a backlog, right?
Well,
he gets extra.
Yeah. Well, we give him priority because he's awesome.
What does he do with 12 Teslas? I'm sorry.
Well, he's a super nice guy. He's an ophthalmologist, actually, and he just he's in this town. I think it's 15,000 people. It's called Narvik or something, and he kind of just leaves them around town so people can drive them.
Only in Scandinavia, really. Wow. But listen, there's so much more to talk about, but I want to bring Michael back up here to join us as we continue, because he has a lot of great things to add, and he's thinking in some very similar ways. So Michael, if you could join us, that'd be great. Thank you. Michael, thank you for having us, by the way.
Sure thing.
Welcome back. Thank you so much. So, I don't know, when you listen to this guy talk, what is it that you are most interested in, or what inspires you about him and that made you want to have him here?
Well, you know, doing cool stuff and taking big risks. I mean, I think we do have a bit of an affliction of short-term thinking in our society, and it shows up in many forms in education, healthcare, government, finance. You know, I got a bit of a taste of that as we went private, and I think we need more people like Elon, you know, out there taking big risks. And so, you know, what you've been doing is inspiring. When the Tesla Model S was announced, I went online and ordered one, and
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, one day just sort of
He
was
couldn't
pretty cool. Just
stop
kind of
talking.
showed up at my house.
He
you
couldn't
know?
stop talking about how much he enjoys driving it backstage, by the way.
Yeah, it just kind of showed up at my house. You know, it's like here's your car. You know?
Right.
And that's not just because you're Michael Dell. I mean, they're pretty.
Yeah.
You have a good customer relations system.
I think so, yeah.
Very good. As a thrilled customer, I could say it's very good. And you know, it's a computer that's also a car. So
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
you gotta love that, right?
Yeah, you got to love that. Well, it's also interesting what you're saying, Michael, about long-term thinking. I mean, I assume that, and I know one of the main benefits of being private is you really are going to be able to do what you want to do in a way that the capital markets have really made it hard to do, because you know they're always looking over your shoulder and what have you done for me this quarter, and you're in an industry that's changing so quickly. Clearly, you must feel very liberated yourself to begin to think. I mean, take actions on the things that you've wanted to do for a long time, so that you can make your company more the way he's, especially before he was public. Now he's got the public markets too.
Yeah.
Yeah, tremendously liberated, and kind of unleashed the energy and creativity of our teams inside the company, and be able to make bold bets without having to necessarily worry about the short-term impact of those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You, as a public CEO with Tesla, recently were even saying you thought your stock was overvalued. I mean, this is not the kind of thing CEOs usually say. Now it's a little bit closer to what you think rational level.
Well, I did think it got a little crazy there. You know, it went up to like $22 billion market cap, which, I mean, given that we're, you know, going to have revenue a little over $2 billion this year, that's revenue. You know, it's like, I'm like, this is probably a bit generous. Now, despite the fact that I said that on several occasions, when the stock did eventually correct, there's a bunch of like shareholder lawsuits. I'm like,
yeah, there you go.
I mean, I didn't want it to be up that high anyway, and then it dropped, and then you get sued for the drop. And you're like, what?
Do you spend a lot of time thinking about the stock price? I mean, is this motivating you, or is that, how do you?
No, I think
that
it's
in?
a big distraction, actually. I mean, the market is like a manic depressive. I mean, it just one day it's like super great, and then it's negative, and you're like, I mean, it's not like the underlying fundamentals of Tesla change that much. It's, but the instantaneous price changes just a huge amount.
Well, you've been through that roller coaster too. I mean, jeez.
For 25 years, yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no wonder you got a big smile on your face today, right?
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. And you know, I think the public markets can absolutely play a role in providing capital, and I'm very proud. I mean, you know, during the time we were a public company, our stock went up over 13,500%.
That ain't bad.
That's pretty good. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse. You know, that's 27 times better than the S&P 500 during the same period. You know, lots of ups and downs. But I think now being able to do this with a longer-term focus is just tremendous.
Well, let's talk, you know, you in your talk, Michael, were talking about, you know, even issues like global poverty and how technology is playing a role in really helping to address that. I'd like you both to talk a little bit about, you know, where we stand today in terms of future breakthroughs and what really excites you. I mean, when you guys both look at the future that we're heading towards, you know, we hear a lot of gloom and doom about, you know, climate change and, you know, clash of civilizations and a lot of negativity. But, you know, I think the three of us tend to share more of an optimism about what's possible. But, you know, what specifically do you think technology is going to be able to address in the next decade that is critical, that we ought to be excited about, or that we could all contribute to? I mean, either one of you have any thoughts on that? I'd be curious.
Yeah, you know, I think there aren't really a lot of boundaries on that. And as I was saying a little bit earlier, you think about all the challenges that are out there, the unsolved problems, the computational power, as the cost of that comes down, becomes more available, you can go and solve a lot of these challenges in energy, environment, healthcare, education. It doesn't just happen automatically because we introduce a new product or something like that. It requires much more. And then you think about, all right, there's been all this data that's, you know, starting to be collected, stored, protected, and now, you know, sensors and tens of billions of devices. Well, how do you actually use all that to make better decisions? I mean, we're just like at the very beginning of that whole age of technology, and that's an enormous release of productivity and capability and capacity. And you know, I think the ultimate dream has always been, how do you combine the creative capabilities of the brain and humans with all this computational power? And you know, there's still lots to be done in terms of user interface and making sense of all this information. It is a very exciting time, and I'm incredibly optimistic. I see huge opportunity. You know, and the folks that aren't optimistic, they're usually the ones that are getting in the way. So, you know, like, kind of, please step aside. You know.
You mean like on Wall Street, for example?
Sometimes, yes.
But so really in specific, the sort of the distribution of computational power and the instrumentation of the world is one of the key pieces that gets you excited. I mean, just quickly, do you think that sort of the world is going to come together economically faster because of that? I mean, we have this huge problem of income inequality both in the US but globally. That's obviously the biggest challenge the world faces. Do you see that being remediated with technological progress, Michael? And then I want to hear your thoughts on all this.
I think it's if you look at the evidence, it's absolutely given rise to all kinds of economies beyond the most well-established ones to grow much faster. Now, you know, it's sort of a necessary but not sufficient precondition for that. There can be all sorts of things that can disrupt it or cause problems. So, you know, just having the technology doesn't solve the problems. You need you know, a certain amount of culture and you know, government and institutional support to make it happen. But you know, when I think about the places that we travel a lot and the enormous progress that's occurred in those places, it's been right on the back of this whole wave of microprocessors and networks and connectivity and information, and the outcomes and the lives of the people in those societies are improving at a rather rapid rate. You know, that doesn't mean, you know, everyone is benefiting from that. But you know, the statistics are pretty overwhelming in terms of the you know, reduction in the number of people in the world that are living in poverty.
So, Elon, what is most exciting to you about where we're heading in the big picture?
Well, I think first of all, it's worth pointing out that we're actually at what is arguably the best period of time in human history. I'm not sure what time would be better. Let me put it that way. You know, in terms of violence per capita in the world, lowest ever in history. You wouldn't necessarily know that reading the newspapers, because the newspapers seem to...
reading Steven Pinker's book, right?
Yeah, Steven Pinker. Like, people should read Steven Pinker. He's awesome, by the way. He's like...
Yeah, well, he wrote that book saying that...
Yeah, exactly.
Violence has steadily declined over human history. Yeah.
Well, not... I mean, it's definitely low now, and it's been sinusoidal. Obviously, in the 20th century, there was some.
Yeah, we've had bad periods. There's no doubt, but
there's some bad moments there in the 20th century. But like violence per capita, lowest in human history today, and I mean, there's a lot of talk about income inequality and whatnot, but I think we should also think about information equality. The amount of information equality that exists in the world is unbelievable as a result of the internet.
Information equality. That's a nice phrase. I like that. Yeah.
It's really phenomenal. Because if you go back, say, 30 years ago and say, okay, well, the President of the United States probably had the most access to information of any person on Earth.
Right.
But, I mean, today, if you have access to the internet, you've got access to more information than the President of the United States had 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You have access to all the world's information.
It's so amazing.
You can go on Google and search for any book, any scholarly work. You know, Wikipedia is actually pretty damn good.
It's damn good.
Yeah. I mean, it's like 90% accurate. It's just not clear what 90%. But it's really incredible what you can learn and how connected you can be to people all around the world. And you know, so I think one shouldn't ignore the negatives, but I think one shouldn't ignore the positives either. And if you, I do think something needs to change about maybe modern media, because it's like a misery microscope. A lot of the newspapers seem to be...
The media, yeah.
I actually think like the magazines are pretty good. Like the magazines are more balanced, but
well, as a 25-year veteran of Fortune, I'm glad to hear that, but go ahead.
Yeah, the magazines are sort of more, they do sort of long form articles that are more, there's still a negative bias in some magazines, but it's less negative than the newspapers. The newspapers tend to be, I mean, it seems like they're...
Hey, what about like, you know, BuzzFeed and, you know, HuffPo and...
Yeah, but a lot of the major newspapers seem to be trying to answer the question, what is the worst thing that happened on Earth today?
That's true. Well, it's sensational. It gets people's attention.
It does. And it does so for, I think, a fundamental evolutionary reason, which is that we're trained to respond to dangerous things. Now, but we didn't evolve to have global media. So if something terrible happened in some faraway part of the world, that kind of triggers the negative response in our limbic system, even though there's no way that actually represents a danger at all to you know, and it's not something you should really worry about. Anyway, so I think one can really have a severely negatively biased view of the world reading the newspapers, which is simply inaccurate.
I didn't think this would be where we'd go, but what do you two think about, you know, two of your co-moguls, you know, Pierre Omidyar and Jeff Bezos, getting into that business very aggressively right now? Is that, for just follow-up specifically, is that something you're excited about seeing? What Pierre Omidyar and Jeff may do, the Washington Post and the new thing that Pierre's making?
Yeah, but those are interesting moves. I think it's, you know, I do think that something like the Washington Post is an important institution that should be preserved, and you know, hopefully Jeff can do a good job with it. I don't totally understand the reasons for it, but I'm hopeful that'll be positive.
But I mean, just in your critique of media, is this like just something we will live with, or do you feel like it's something we could address?
Well, I think it is something we should collectively seek to address, and you know, and I think to some degree it's going to be at the personal selection front, where people will simply choose to get their news in ways that are not from the newspaper, unless the newspaper changes. That's the fundamental driver of it. It's the action of all sort of individuals who consume news that will drive the change. And I think that is actually already happening. I mean, I get my news from Twitter.
That's your primary source?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Michael? What's your primary source of news, would you say?
Well, Twitter's great for news. You know, there's certainly kind of specialty sites, and I use some of the search engines to kind of bring me news, you know, as it's happening.
You mean like with alerts or things like that? Yeah. But you know, this subject actually dovetails with something I wanted to bring up, and we've got a couple of minutes left, but you know, the whole role of the company, right? I mean, because you know, here Dell, for example, I don't know the degree to which SpaceX or Tesla are doing this, but Dell is a publisher now, right? I mean, Dell's actually made quite a bit of a move towards, you know,
Content.
Pardon me?
Content.
Content, right. I mean, the business press doesn't cover tech as well as a lot of companies would like, or as thoroughly, and Dell is among several companies that have really aggressively said, we want to help get ideas out there that we believe in. And maybe that's the reason I think it's pertinent to this discussion is, you know, the whole question of the role of the company as a social force, as a, not just building of products and services that are good, but thinking bigger as part of the responsibility of the enterprise. I mean, Michael, can you kind of tie those things together, or did I giving you enough to work with there?
You know, I think we have about 2 billion conversations with our customers a year, and that certainly gives us a great opportunity to, you know, turn that into content and to, you know, build that relationship much further. But I think you know, companies, you know, having a purpose-driven organization, incredibly inspiring to our teams as they see the difference that, you know, what we do, you know, brings for our customers, empowering them. That's a far more inspiring passion than anything else.
Yeah.
And you know, we try to ignite that engagement, and a lot of that comes around the conversation with our customers and how do you connect, you know, what it is we do to healthcare or education, or you know, solving the world's biggest problems. That's what inspires our team and inspires our engineers, you know, to go create new solutions. You know, that's far more interesting, exciting, and compelling than, hey, let's go make the next version of the thing, you know.
But as the dialogue and the quality and the volume and the intensity of the dialogue with the customers increases and improves, right? The ability on both sides, to understanding on the side of the customers and sort of innovative capacity and direction and focus on the company side improves, right? I mean, even as you were talking about, you know, how proud you are, you know, you get the car right in Michael's driveway when he wants it or whatever. I mean, I assume this is a big priority, getting feedback constantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I know you're a data-driven guy, and I mean, the screen in the Tesla is practically as big as the entire dashboard, and I assume it's creating information that you're constantly reacting to back at the corporate level, right?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but...
Well, I mean, you're getting feedback from the vehicle all the time, right?
Yes. Well, the vehicles are constantly connected, and so in terms of analytical data, you know, we can see if a car has some issue that's developing, so we can be proactive about servicing that issue. You know, we don't store any sort of private information like, you know, where somebody's been or how fast they went or something like that.
Yes,
so,
this is sensitive
to be
territory,
clear.
I realize. How fast they're driving. You don't store that?
We do not store how fast they drove.
You promised that?
Yes.
Okay. Michael, okay, you can speed.
Yeah. So
apparently everybody who has a Tesla does, as I understand it, but anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, we certainly look at things at a statistical level and see what people are doing and try to figure out how we can make the car better. I mean, that's really the reason for it. So we look for data from the car, we look for feedback from customers, and we try to make the vehicle experience as compelling as possible. I mean, what really gets me excited is when people experience delight with the product. You know, just I don't think there's not all that many things where you really experience delight, and if you can make a product good enough that it so far exceeds people's expectations that it just makes them happy. I mean, I think that's amazing.
Do you feel that when you get behind the wheel, Michael?
I do, yeah.
Good.
As I said, it's a great product. You know, I think the thing we see in these conversations is if a customer experiences something, chances are it's not the first time that's occurred. And so that's an incredible learning opportunity for us. So, you know, we're monitoring and protecting hundreds of millions of mission-critical devices out there all over the world. If something happens out there, well, you know, it's going to be happening more than once. And so how do we proactively learn from that, fix it, you know, before the customer sees it as an issue, take that information into the next generation, the next release, and fundamentally build a better product, a better service, because we have big ears as a company. You know, which is kind of how we started the company, listening, designing the company.
Well, you've been a more customer-connected company in your industry than almost any from the beginning. I mean, that was the whole model.
Started with the customer and designed the company back from listening to the customer.
Well, unfortunately, we have to end, and that's not a bad place to end, because I think that you're being private and the way you're talking now is really a return to the roots of Dell. It's very exciting for me as a longtime observer to see that happening. Certainly a pleasure to be up here and a privilege to be talking to the two of you in particular, so thank you so much. Thank you, Elon, for being here, and thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.